This is Charles Fuqua. I'm a retired attorney, and I'd like to explain to you the term radical Islam. The term Islam is used constantly in the news media and by politicians. What does the term mean? If there was a term radical Christianity, what would it mean? It would have to mean that the people that were radical Christians were emulating Jesus Christ. They would be healing the sick, raising the dead, loving people that hate them, being willing to sacrifice their lives for people that do not deserve it, and living a life for the benefit of others. Since Islam centers around the Prophet Muhammad, being a radical Islamist would be living a life emulating the Prophet Muhammad. This is what Islam teaches that every Muslim should do. How does one emulate the Prophet of Muhammad? He must do the things that Muhammad did. What did Muhammad do? To know this, we must study the writings that Islamic scholars study: the Quran, Sirah, and Hadith, the holy books of Islam. I find that some non-Muslims do not believe that Muhammad did the things that the Quran, Sirah, and Hadith say he did. That is irrelevant because all Muslim scholars believe those books to be accurate and believe that Muhammad did the things stated in these writings. Leaders of groups like ISIS and Boko Haram study these books and try as much as possible to emulate the life of Muhammad. The leader of ISIS has a doctorate in Islamic theology. He is doing an excellent job of emulating the life of Muhammad. So what was the life of Muhammad like? Observe what ISIS and Boko Haram are doing, and you can see that these groups are accurately following the teachings and practices of Muhammad. Muhammad taught his followers that the spoils of war had been made lawful for Muslims, yet it was not lawful for anyone before Muhammad. Muhammad put together an army to conquer the entire world and place it in submission to Allah. He taught his followers to ask those conquered, "Do you confess that Allah is God and Muhammad his prophet?" Anyone that refuses to make that confession is to be immediately beheaded. Muhammad made a 10-year treaty with the inhabitants of his former hometown of Mecca. 2 years later, he violated the treaty. This is the origin of the doctrine of taqiyya, or sacred deception. In order to gain advantage over infidels, Muslims have a sacred duty to lie to them. Conquered women are slaves, and their children are the property of the Muslim man that impregnates them. These children are raised as jihadists and taught to be willing to die in jihad to make Muhammad richer. After conquering one peaceful village, beheading all the men, and using women and little girls for sexual pleasure, Muhammad was asked face to face if he was being just. His reply was, "If justice is not to be found with me, then where will you find it?" There is no such thing as radical Islam. There is only Islam. Politicians and the press say we must be tactful and not offend the moderate Muslims that will help us defeat radical Islam. This is a strategy of endless compromise and ultimate defeat. Every person that follows Muhammad follows him into hell. If Christians love the Muslims that Jesus Christ died for, we must uncompromisingly tell them the truth. We cannot make treaties with them, as they are taught by Muhammad that a treaty with an infidel is a means to deceive and destroy the infidel. Many argue that most Muslims are not radicals and do not want to kill non-Muslims. This may be true, but any Muslim that studies and understands Islamic doctrine knows that Muslims that are referred to as radical are accurately following the practices and teachings of Muhammad. So how can Islam be reformed? Would a Muslim reformation take Islam back to the original teachings and practices of Muhammad? That is radical Islam. Islam cannot be reformed. It can only be eliminated. Islam is not a religion. It has always been a criminal enterprise masquerading as religion. The Quran teaches the doctrine of abrogation. While man may not change anything, Allah can change or supersede any revelation with something better if he chooses. Therefore, the teachings of the earlier prophets, such as Moses and Jesus, and even the early teachings of Muhammad, have been superseded by the later teachings of Muhammad. Islam also teaches that the Hebrew and Christian holy books have been corrupted, so that only the teachings of Muhammad are trustworthy. Islam teaches that a kafir is an unbeliever or a concealer. Literally translated, it means one who conceals the truth of Islam. It is a person that does not follow Islam. A kafir under Islamic teaching is evil, disgusting, the lowest form of life. Muslim doctrine, as taught and practiced by Muhammad, is that all kafirs should be hated, deceived, plotted against, disarmed, enslaved, mocked, robbed, disgraced, humiliated, cursed, terrorized, raped, tortured, and killed. And this includes women and children. Muhammad ordered the assassination of those who criticize him. Is it any wonder we see no difference in the behavior of Muhammad's followers today? Muslim nations allow no freedom of speech, press, thought, or religion. A false religion has no choice but to attack and suppress all truth. Falsehood cannot survive open and honest debate. Islam allows no debate. The important question is, how do Muslims obtain forgiveness for their sins from their God? The Quran teaches that Allah forgave Muhammad's sins when he killed infidels. From this, we learn two things. Number one, Muhammad was a sinner. Number two, since the Quran teaches that Muhammad was the perfect example of human conduct, all Muslim sinners gain favor with Allah by killing non-Muslims. Therefore, Islam requires human sacrifice for Muslims to be forgiven for their sins. Is the blood of sinful infidels an acceptable sacrifice for the forgiveness of the sins of Muslims to reconcile them to Allah? If it is, who is Allah? Muhammad taught that the greatest act a Muslim can perform is to accept Allah as the only God and Muhammad as his prophet. He taught that the next greatest act is to wage holy war or jihad in the name of Allah. This is why we see well-educated Muslims like Major Nadel Hassan, a psychiatrist and member of the United States military, give up his career and life to engage in jihad. False religion has been used for millennia to subjugate and oppress people and to satisfy the greedy, selfish, and lustful desires of evil men. The false religion Muhammad founded is the most evil of all false religions. Over 270 million Jews, Christians, Hindus, Buddhists, and Africans have been murdered by the loyal followers of Muhammad. It is time to tell the truth. Muhammad was the most evil man that ever lived, and Islam is the greatest evil ever conceived in the mind of man or demon. The world cannot compromise with this evil. It must be eliminated. It is time to end our animosity with Russia and China and join with them, as well as India, Europe, and the rest of the world, to destroy this great evil. Many people, perhaps even the majority in Muslim nations, would celebrate being freed from this great oppression. This is Charles Fuqua. I'm the author of the book God's Law, the Only Political Solution, and I'm available to speak at churches or any other group setting. Thank you.